Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading cosmic horror related stories every single day. So if that sounds good, please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. Trail maintenance is physical work with a mental simplicity that I found genuinely restorative for the 3 summers I did it. You show up, you assess the damage the previous winter left behind, and you fix it. Erosion cuts, drainage issues, overgrowth on the tread, blowdowns across the path. The work is clear and the results are visible, and at the end of a day, you can look at what you did and know exactly what you accomplished. I like that about it. I still like that about it in the abstract, the way you can like something that has been permanently complicated by what happened inside it. The 3rd summer was the Ozarks, a trail system in northwestern Arkansas that ran along a series of ridges above a river valley and had taken a bad winter. The crew was 4 people. Me, a second-year worker named Felon, who was fast and reliable and had a dry humor that made the long days easier. A first-year named Dos, who was 22 and enthusiastic in the way that first years usually are before the heat and the repetition flatten it out. And a crew lead named Burr, who had been doing this work for 9 years and communicated primarily through a series of sighs that conveyed the full range of human response to any given situation. We were 3 weeks into the season when we found the cave. The ridge we were working that week ran roughly east to west above a creek drainage, and the section we were clearing had a long stretch of slope failure on the uphill side of the trail where a wet spring had pulled sections of the bank down across the tread. Standard work, clearing the debris, reshaping the drainage, reinforcing the trail edge. We were moving along it methodically when Dos called out from about 30 feet ahead, where he'd been clearing a particularly dense section of collapsed material. He said there was a hole in the bank. I went up to look because hole in the bank covers a range of situations in trail work, and some of them are structural problems that need addressing before you walk around on top of them. What Dos had found was not a drainage cavity or a root void or any of the other things I was expecting. The slope failure had pulled away a section of the hillside maybe 8 feet wide, and in the exposed face behind it was an opening in the rock, roughly arched, wide enough to walk into without ducking if you were under 6 feet, and deep enough that the light from outside didn't reach the back of it. I stood in front of it for a while. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. Cave entrances in the Ozarks run cool because of the thermal exchange between the interior air and the surface, which is normal and expected. But the coolness coming out of this one was more pronounced than the geology of the ridge should have produced. The ridge was primarily sandstone with some chert intrusion, not the limestone karst that produces significant cave systems in this part of Arkansas. There wasn't supposed to be a cavity of any meaningful size in this formation. The second thing I noticed was the stillness, not the absence of wind, though there was that too. A deeper stillness, the kind that registers as a quality of the space rather than a weather condition, as if the air in front of the opening had a different relationship to movement than the air around it. Burr came up and looked at it and pulled out his phone and checked the topo maps we used for the section. He checked the State Geological Survey map he kept in the truck. He went, through 3 different sources and came up with the same result, which was that the ridge at this location showed no cave or significant subsurface feature of any kind. The surveys went back to the 40s. None of them had a marking that corresponded to what we were standing in front of. He said it was probably shallow, probably just a recess in the formation that read as closed on survey equipment, and that we should note it in our trail report and move on. Felon looked at him and then at the entrance and said she wanted to look inside. Burr shrugged one of his shrugs, which in his vocabulary meant something like, "It's not my problem if you're careful about it," and went back to the drainage work. Doss immediately said he'd go in with her. I said I'd stay outside and that they should stay close enough to the entrance to hear me if I called, which they agreed to without much thought. They had headlamps from their packs. They clicked them on and went in. I stood outside and looked at the entrance and listened to the sound of their movement inside, footsteps on stone, the occasional comment between them, getting quieter as they went further in. After about 5 minutes, I couldn't hear them anymore, which meant they were further in than I was comfortable with, given what I knew about the geology. But I could still see the edge of Felon's headlamp beam on the cave wall just inside the entrance, so I stayed put. 20 minutes after they went in, they came back out. Doss first, then Felon. Both of them fine, physically, no scrapes or obvious issues, headlamps still working. Doss was smiling, said it went back a good ways and opened up into a larger chamber that he wished he'd had better lighting to see properly. Felon said the floor was mostly dry and the formations inside were interesting. Some flowstone on the lower walls that was unusual for the rock type. She said it was worth reporting to the Geological Survey. We went back to work. That evening at the crew camp, I noticed the first thing, though I didn't identify it as a thing at the time. It registered as a vague social misread that I put down to tiredness. Doss and I had a running bit that had developed over the first 3 weeks, a recurring joke built on a specific miscommunication we'd had on the first day about a particular piece of equipment. It was the kind of in-joke that only exists in context, that only lands if you were there when it started. I made the reference at dinner and Doss smiled at the right moment. But the smile was a beat late and had the quality of someone responding to a social cue rather than a shared memory. Like he'd read the room and determined that smiling was the correct output rather than actually finding it funny. I noted it and didn't think about it again that night. Over the following week, I thought about it a lot. The accumulation was what made it undeniable. Any single instance was explainable. Doss being quieter than usual, tiredness, Felon not catching a reference she would normally have caught, distraction, Doss responding to a question about something that happened in week 1 of the season with a slight delay that looked like effort, long shift. Each one individually was nothing. Together, they were a pattern I couldn't shake. They had lost the thread of the season before the cave. That was the most precise way I found to describe it to myself. Everything that had happened in the 3 weeks before they went inside, the shared experiences and the developed shorthand and the particular texture of a group of people who have been working together long enough to become fluent in each other. They were present for it, but no longer connected to it in the way that people are connected to their own recent past. They could report facts from that period if asked. They just didn't carry it with them the way you carry the recent past, as something warm and close and self-evidently yours. Felon laughed at the right times. Doss was helpful and competent and showed up every morning ready to work. Neither of them did anything that would have been visible as wrong to anyone who hadn't been there the whole season, hadn't built up the comparison between before and after. I had been there the whole season. I had the comparison. I started watching them the way you watch something that you're not sure is moving, with the specific attention of someone trying to determine if the change they're seeing is real or a trick of the light. I watched Doss try to remember something that happened in week 2, something funny that Burr had said during a particularly difficult drainage project, and I watched his face do the work of retrieval in a way that faces don't do for recent memories. Recent memories don't need retrieval. They're just there. Doss worked for that memory like it was stored somewhere he had to go looking for it. He found it, eventually. He got the detail right. But the getting there was wrong. Felon was the same. Functional, present, socially navigable, and underneath all of that, a discontinuity that I kept reaching for and finding in the same place, like a loose tooth you can't stop touching. She was there, but she was there the way a photograph of a person is there, all the visible information intact. The animating connection to her own past removed so cleanly she didn't seem to know it was gone. 2 weeks after the cave, I went back to it alone. I want to be clear that I did not intend to go inside. I want to be clear about that because what I'm about to describe might read as the behavior of someone being pulled towards something. And I need you to understand that I chose to go, and I chose to stay outside, and I chose to leave when I did. What happened at the entrance was not something that overrode my choices. It informed them, but the choices were mine. I stood in front of the opening in the early afternoon when the light was good and the temperature was mild, and there was no reason for the cold coming out of the entrance to feel as pronounced as it did. I stood at the threshold and looked in, and the stillness was there again, deeper than before. Or maybe I was just more attuned to it. A density in the air at the entrance that felt less like temperature and more like a quality of the space itself. The particular atmosphere of something that has been doing one thing for a very long time. I felt the loosening after about 2 minutes. That's the only word I have for it. A loosening at the edges of myself. Not physical, not painful, not even particularly dramatic. A gentle reduction in the tension that I hadn't known I was maintaining until it began to ease, the tension of being a continuous person, of holding the thread of your own history taut from one moment to the next. It began to feel like something I could set down, not frightening. That was the part I was least prepared for. It felt like relief in the way that going to sleep feels like relief, letting go of the effort of being yourself. I stepped back. I stepped back twice, and then I turned around and walked down the ridge at a pace I didn't moderate, and I didn't look back, and I didn't stop until I was at the truck. I sat in the truck for a long time. What I'd felt at the entrance for 2 minutes had been the beginning of something. Doss and Felon had been inside for 20. Whatever the cave did, whatever it was or contained or was the threshold of, it had a reach that extended to the entrance and a depth of effect that corresponded to exposure time. 2 minutes at the door had given me a preview that I'd walked away from. 20 minutes inside had taken something from them that they didn't know was gone. I filed a report with the State Geological Survey 2 days later using a payphone at a gas station outside of town, anonymous, describing an unmapped cave entrance on the ridge with the GPS coordinates I'd taken on the first day. I told them the opening was substantial and the interior appeared to extend well beyond what the local geology should support, and that it warranted professional survey. I left the crew a week before the season ended, which cost me part of my end-of-season pay and required a conversation with Burr that I kept as short as I could. I told him I had a family situation. He gave me the shrug that meant he understood and wasn't going to push on it, and I shook his hand and said goodbye to Doss and Felon and drove out of Arkansas and didn't look back. The Geological Survey's official response came 3 months later. I found it on their public records portal, a brief entry describing a field assessment of the reported location that found a shallow surface depression in the ridge face, consistent with recent erosion activity. No significant subsurface features identified. No further investigation warranted. No cave. I've thought about that report for a long time, and I've landed in roughly the same place every time. Either the survey team found nothing because the cave had closed, the erosion that uncovered it reversing somehow in the weeks between my report and their visit, or the survey team found nothing because what was inside the cave didn't want to be found and had some capacity to present itself as absent to people who came looking officially. Neither explanation is comfortable. I don't have a third one. Doss and Felon are presumably fine. I looked Doss up about a year after that summer and found a social media presence that showed him living a normal life, employed, socially connected, apparently well. Everything looked right. I scrolled through months of posts and photos and found nothing alarming. What I found was an absence I recognized, the particular quality of a person fully present in their current life with no visible thread running back through their own past, all the surface information intact, the animating continuity underneath it gone so cleanly that you'd have to have known him before to see what was missing. I closed the page and didn't look again. The cave is still on that ridge, I have to assume, invisible to anyone who isn't standing in front of it, doing whatever it has been doing since long before a trail crew showed up with headlamps and curiosity and insufficient caution. Whatever it takes from people, it has been collecting for long enough that whatever it stores, wherever it stores it, is full of the particular interior quality of human beings in a quantity I don't want to think about too carefully. The things that make you continuous with yourself, the thread between who you are now and everything that made you that way, the stuff that's not personality, not appearance, not the functional social machinery, the deeper thing underneath all of that, the thing you don't notice until you feel it beginning to loosen at the edges. It wants that, has always wanted that. It's still in there waiting for the next person who decides that a hole in the ground is worth a closer look.